What's going on, guys? This is live stream 27. In this live stream, we're going to be talking about the Polish MIG deal to Ukraine. We're also going to be talking about higher gas prices. They're going up, and hopefully they stabilize soon, but they're definitely way higher than they've been in a long time. I've got a full panel tonight, unlike last week. So I'm going to go around the horn and introduce everybody, and then we're going to kick right into this, fellas. So first and foremost, we got Les, no stranger to this YouTube channel. His YouTube channel of his own is called Pegasus Tests. Les is a Marine that served in the early 90s. He's a veteran of the Gulf War. He's got his own logistics company, so he's a master of move and shift from point A to point B. He also has his own tactical training company called Polaris Tactics and Simulations Division. So make sure you guys check him out at Pegasus Tests. Les, thanks for coming on tonight, brother.
Happy to be here, Brent.
Next, we got my good buddy Chad. Chad and I served together in Bravo Company, 1st Battalion, 23rd Marines. We deployed to Afghanistan together in 2011, 2012 timeframe. He's a veteran of Iraq. He was in the initial invasion in 03, went back in 04 and fought in the Battle of Fallujah. And always a wealth of knowledge. He's studying to get his doctorate in military history. I appreciate him coming on the stream tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Next, we got the good doctor, Dr. Christopher Larson. He is the original founder of the One Shepherd Leadership Institute. He's a former Army NCO. He's written many books on small unit tactics. He's an absolute wealth of knowledge. He has his own YouTube channel as well called Christopher Larson. And you guys really need to check him out. Once again, wealth of knowledge. Doc, thanks for coming on tonight.
Great to be here.
All right, we got John, Alpha Charlie Concepts, also the CEO of UW Gear, makes high-quality chest rigs and other associated equipment. John has his own YouTube channel, obviously, Alpha Charlie Concepts, and UW Gear YouTube channel. And he always brings a great arm-prepared citizen perspective to the chat. John, thanks for coming on tonight, brother. Oh, and he's also an Army veteran. Can't leave that out. All right, last but not least, got my buddy Michael. Michael served in the reserves. He deployed to Iraq, so he is a Marine Corps veteran. He's a friend of mine, an old coworker. Used to work together. First job I ever held, leaving active duty Marine Corps, and he's a friend of mine and definitely brings a different perspective to this chat. So that's the whole purpose of him being on tonight. Michael, thanks for jumping on tonight, brother.
Thank you.
All right. So that is our panel tonight, guys. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go around the horn. I'm going to start with Les. And then, well, actually, let me back up. Let me just reintroduce our very first topic. So we got two topics tonight. The first one is the Ukraine, Poland, U.S. MiG-29 deal. And then the second one is going to be rising gas prices. But we're going to start with this MiG deal. So to preface this, there was a kind of a deal worked out where the Poles, who were in the process of getting newer, more modern Western aircraft, i.e. like F-16s. They wanted to get rid of their older Soviet MiG-29s, and they said, hey, we'll give these to the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians, this is what they fly. They got pilots, and we're more than happy to give you guys these MiGs. However, we can't get rid of these MiGs without replenishing our own aircraft because we are not at that point yet. So what they were asking were some F-16s from the United States to replace those MiGs that were going to go to Poland. And if I'm not mistaken, the Secretary of State at first was like, yep, you know, we're all good. We're on board with this, you know, good on you. And then one day Poland said, hey, we've got these MiGs ready to go. We're going to send them over to Ramstein Air Force Base for the U.S. to transfer these over to the Ukrainians. And at that point, the U.S. is like, yeah, we don't want anything to do with this now. So that is going to be topic number one. So with that being said, guys, I'm going to kick it over to Les. Take it away, brother. Still muted.
The big deal about this MiG deal is, what the fuck, over? How freaking hard is this? So originally this started with Poland's got some ex-Soviet jets, so the Romanians, so the Bulgarians. And Jens Stoltenberg, the head of NATO, said, oh, yeah, NATO could give these jets and then backfill those with other jets from NATO nations to upgrade those air forces. And then, sorry about that. And then that got some steam and everything. And then the Bulgarians and the Romanians said, yeah, but if we give our Air Force away, we need other planes. And then it went quiet for a couple days. And then after that, this deal pops up that Brent was talking about, where the Poles will say, hey, we'll give the jets to the U.S. and we'll turn them over to U.S. Custody in Ramstein Air Base. And then our side, our government goes, whoa, that might be too freaking provocative. That might tip things to go the wrong way with Putin, to which I cannot figure out, because we're littering the Ukraine with all kinds of weapons. Javelins are turning T-80s into the world's biggest scrapyard over there in Ukraine. So if that's not pissing Vlad off, I can't see how 24 MIGs are going to make him go, that's it, nuclear wartime. I mean, this literally makes no sense. I mean, we're talking a couple dozen jets here, about 24 from Poland, and then Romanians and the Bulgarians don't really have much of an air force. So there's not a lot more MiGs there. So tops, if we're being overly generous, we're talking about 40 planes here. You telling me there ain't 40 F-16s sitting out in Arizona desert, between the West Germans getting rid of their Tornadoes, the British getting their Tornadoes and replacing them with Eurofighter, the Norwegians and the Danes and the Netherlands upgrading from their F-16s to the F-35. We can't find 40 F-16s to backfill our NATO allies. Come on, please. The fact that we are not doing this just makes us look like a bunch of idiots. Rant over.
Yeah, well said, Les. There's not much I can really add to that. I will say that the Russian idea of peacekeepers being employed in Ukraine, well, that's obviously gone to the wayside. Now they've kind of employed their, typical Russian doctrine of starting to shell cities like they did in Grozny. Obviously, the Ukrainians need something to tip the scales in their favor. This is probably another leadership failure by the United States. I think we're a little bit too scared of Putin. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
All right, so it's hard to separate the wheat from the chaff here. I mean, we are being fed a lot of propaganda, and I'm not even upset about it. I'm upset about propaganda when there's not a war, and spying and all of this other stuff. But during a war, you're in a fight for your life, and I don't blame any side from anywhere putting out there. It's information operations, right? So propaganda. From all the propaganda I'm seeing, I'd say there are two truths. The first truth is that Ukraine is the underdog and that Ukraine is putting up a fight that nobody, I think the Ukrainians are surprised at the fight that they're putting up. And certainly the Russians and all of the, the rest of the world are just flabbergasted at how effective the Ukrainian fight. And that's wonderful to see. It is. They're fighting for their homeland. They're fighting for their sovereignty. And I would love to call them an ally. I would be very proud to call them a U.S. ally. The problem is, of course, that they're not a U.S. ally because an ally means like, flesh and blood, right? And so I'm going to defend them. And everything we're talking about here is how America and the NATO refuses to defend Ukraine. They're in a bar fight for their life, and we're sitting on the side going, yeah, hopes and prayers and stuff like this. So clearly they're not our ally. We're like, yeah, I'm with you, brother, but by brother, I technically mean legally this, that, and we're like nervously, manipulating our sweaty palms. So, okay. The truth is that Ukraine is putting up one hell of a fight. That's the first truth. The second truth is this: Russia's winning. By every single military metric of warfare, Russia is winning. That's the ugly truth. And that's the one we don't want to pay attention to. And again, I don't blame Ukraine for not admitting this. But guys, on the map, Russia's winning. Now, the question is, how long can those two truths simultaneously hold up? Either Russia will win and Ukraine, their dogmatic fight will falter, or Russia will lose this, and they can lose it in one of several ways. They can lose it in Ukraine due to the Ukrainians. They can lose it in the world stage in economics, or they can lose it at home with their own people. So Russia is in a very precarious situation, as you always are when you're attacking. They're on the offense and they're attacking. But don't lie to yourselves. Russia is winning. And that makes us get to, and so there's the question, why not MIGs? Well, there's lots to consider, but we'll talk about that further, I'm sure. The last point is, I'll jump into the last point, and that is, I would argue this is your third truth. Economics is a fickle bitch. And when a butterfly flaps its wing in Saudi Arabia, we feel it here. Our oil prices are up. How's that sanctions working for you? All right, that's what I got. Let's get into it.
Well, I guess that's my turn then. I'm just here to eat cookies and drink coffee. That said, I'm still of the camp that I'm watching the two really sketchy, questionable, not so friendly looking guys wait in at the end of the street duking it out. And I'm just kind of sitting back saying, yeah, I don't see a reason why I ought to be directly involved in this in any way, shape, or form just yet. Still kind of on the fence. I think Ukraine is surprised that they're holding the Russians, slowing them down. I think the bigger elephant in the room is why the Russians aren't going any faster than they are. And I think that's something that everybody overlooks. And a really good friend of mine that's probably smarter than me and I have talked about this. And our theory is that after the Cold War, the Russians significantly lost a large part of their experienced both NCO and officer corps. They've spent a lot of time and money trying to catch up to us and others technologically without focusing on actual rebuilding the military. Hence, you're seeing them perform at the level that they are, while they are still ever so steadily pushing in on the Ukrainians. They're not just steamrolling them. And I think that's because possibly maybe the great big bad Russian boogeyman that we were all made to think was so big and bad wasn't quite as big and bad as we were led to believe, which I kind of questioned for a long time for all those reasons. Right, wrong, I don't know. Not really my area of expertise. I just kind of armchair quarterback it. But I'm just still not convinced that Russia's given it all they got, and they just ain't got all that much to give. And while I think they'll probably eventually emerge on top, whatever on top ends up looking like, I think they've been made out to be a little bit more than what they are. That's kind of where I'm at right now with it.
Finally, I get to go last. Wow. Everyone brought some excellent things that I definitely want to address. In terms of the MIG thing, as I understand it from some of the sources I read, one of them being on Vox.com, that's Victor Oscar X-ray.com, that the initial proposal was that Poland was going to give their MIGs directly to Ukraine, which was the understanding. But then the revised proposal was that it was going to be from their MIGs that are stationed at Ramstein Air Base in Germany, which therefore puts more of a NATO thing into it. So now that then begs the question is, okay, well, now it's from a U.S. air base, makes it sort of a different scenario. And then, of course, what Doc brought up, John, Chad, is, what's our level of involvement here? Where do we go from here? Are we just ignoring, just a larger effort beyond NATO nations and just protecting Ukraine because they have a democratically elected government? Or do we take a more pragmatic approach. And I'm not saying that's the right one. I'm just saying in terms of, hey, technically a NATO nation has not been attacked, so therefore NATO, the fifth article can't be invoked. Those are all great questions. And then for Doc, I have a question of, what is the definition of Russia winning, as you mentioned, and then what does winning look like in the end?
All right, guys, open floor. So I guess the logical one is, Doc, do you want to pick up that question?
Sure. So the definition of winning, then, let's go back to like traditional definitions of, lace warfare, maneuver warfare, positional warfare. It is that there is a battle space and that you position yourself meaningfully, whether that's in the cities, whether that's on the highest terrain, whatever it is, you position yourself on that terrain and play king of the mountain, and no one can kick you off, right? So everybody, after trying, leaves and you hold the ground. Now, that's a very old way of thinking about it, but when you expand that beyond one mountaintop or hilltop and you start saying, look, I dominate, think of like air supremacy and air dominance, that sort of concept. And that's fleeting because your jets have to be, or drones have to be up in the sky. Well, it's not so fleeting on the ground. If my tanks and infantrymen and artillery and and I dominate the roads and the towns and all of these things, that's what I'm talking about, that sort of dominance. That's clearly a definition. Politically, I would say the dominance is that you are imposing your political will. And that seems to be what Russia is excelling at this point. Look, Russia has invaded Ukraine. Ukraine has not invaded Russia. There's not a single Russian civilian that's even threatened. I mean, their coffee hasn't been spilt. So Russia is, exercising its political will against Ukraine. And the question is whether or not that will sustain, whether Ukraine will yield, and what will be the outcome there. And then finally, there's the economics. And we've made a great deal, and we're going to get to, the impact on us here later this evening. We've made a great deal of the impact of economic sanctions against Russia. And I think that they're pretty wide spanning and that they're pretty severe. I do believe Russians are going to feel this. But I've got a couple things to say about that. And first is that overall, taken over a long period of time, economic sanctions have been shown on average to reduce 2% of the GDP. Nothing phenomenal. That in its best case, it has had and this is phenomenal, it's had a whopping 15 to 20% impact on GDP. And frankly, that's a very felt. Trust me, if you get down to what that means in the daily lives of the citizens, that's very much felt. But my point is that most countries can shake off economic sanctions, and Russia can. It's so big, it has so much independent industry and economics, and then also it has countless ties outside. China, Iran, Afghanistan, I mean, you name it. It goes on, Belarus and several others. So my point is that it's going to be very hard for Russia to suffer that. But what they seem to be doing in a very, very classic doctrine, in classic Red Team Army doctrine, is that they are escalating this. A lot of people will point out like bombed out cities and say, oh, look what they've done. Look, they're targeting people. You know what? I just watched one this morning where they shot down a Russian incoming missile and it landed in a civilian non-combatant area. But they admitted that the Ukrainian army had shot it down. So my point here is this. My point is this. It seems to me now that what Russia is trying to show Ukraine is that it can have economic sanctions against Ukraine. Not sanctions so much, but it can do economic damage. Look at what Russia's doing. It's leveling. It's leveling, raised earth, burning Ukraine, right? Ukrainians they're not going to recover from this. And the longer the Russians stay in, the more they up the ante, the more they say, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come in and I'm going to use smart bombs. I'm going to use cruise missiles, and you're going to fold to my will. You're going to acquiesce to my will. Oh, you're not? Well, then I'll give your people time to get out of the cities, and then I'm burning them to the ground. Now do you want to give to my will? And they're going to keep doing this. They're expanding farther and farther westward. And it seems to me that's a very effective strategy because with Ukraine standing alone, and it is indeed standing alone, it's only a matter of time before Russia wins this. And so I think when you talk about win in terms of the economic damage, when you talk about wins in terms of military operations, and when you talk about a win with political will, these are traditional forms, and Ukraine is not winning in any of these. It is Russia who is making inroads into Ukraine in every single imaginable sense of that word, not vice versa. So while the Ukrainians are putting up just a valiant defense, and I'm championing them, it doesn't sound like I am. In fact, I am. I'm going, go Ukraine. But the fact is, from everything we can observe through all the propaganda, Ukraine's winning. I mean, Ukraine's winning. I'm sorry, Ukraine's losing. And Russia is winning this. Now, how long? How long, Michael? I don't know. How long can Russia keep this up?
Can I respond to that? All right. So I gotta say I disagree with you on almost all of your conclusions that you've reached there. All right. So one, I feel still like you didn't define to me like what's winning. Yes, you gave me the textbook definition from a military standpoint of like going in. Yes, militarily they're making inroads, but it's obviously at a much slower pace than any of us expected, including like our higher ups from in the Pentagon. In terms of politically,
let me slower. Please define slower. They're going faster than we did in the Persian Gulf War. They're going much faster than we did in Europe when we went into Normandy. They're going much faster than the Russians did when they were marching towards Berlin. How do you mean slow? They're going from.
You can't compare this to Normandy. You had Germany well established on the coast of France and all around Western Europe. That's not the same as the Ukrainian.
Fair enough. Let's compare it to 1991 Iraq, or let's compare it to 2003 Iraq. I mean,
I'm going to compare it to 2003 Iraq. Let me tell you. All right.
Yeah,
so one is that we've seen militarily that they are not operating as a combined unit. Like there's not, their air is not supported by. Their armor is not supported by air. They don't have small armed troops along with their tanks as they're going into those regions. It's just like a ad hoc. They do some airstrikes and then they do throw some armor. We've all seen that video of that armor column just all stacked together, freaking just getting nailed by Ukrainian artillery. So it's a very hodgepodge mix, but that doesn't even like scratch the surface of how bad they're fucking up. Politically, you said like they're hurting them, the Ukrainians politically. I mean, their leadership is still intact, and they have the world entirely like on their side. Even China thus far hasn't really done anything to like further to aid the Russians. And then on an economic basis, that 15% hit GDP. That's what our economists are expecting, that all of these sanctions, which are different than other sanctions. I do agree with you that sometimes sanctions don't work. Like we had sanctions against Cuba for 70 years. It doesn't sanction in hopes of that it's going to get rid of the Castro government. That didn't do anything. Why did it not do anything? Because there was other countries that they dealt with economically and like still supported them. So, but that's not the case here with Russia. With here is, we've put our embargo on their oil, which doesn't really make too much of a difference because we provide our own oil. We don't really utilize oil from Russia. Where it really does hurt is the EU, which they've jumped onto it. But of course, they're going to do a phased like weaning off of their oil because naturally for them to just shut off the tap would have a devastating impact on their economy as well. And it already is in terms of we're seeing that in terms of oil prices, so I would say that the Russian people are hurting. That negative 15% or that negative 15% in GDP that they're expecting for the Russian economy is going to have significant impact. on the citizens, sadly, but hopefully on the Russian leadership. And as a coincidence, when Putin took power in Russia, what preceded that was a 15% economic collapse that happened while Yeltsin was president. So it remains to be seen as to what happens. But I think the progress is very slow. And then, as you said, in terms of Iraq, there's one thing about getting into the city and taking over the capital. There's another thing about taking it over and maintaining it. And, as we saw in Iraq, hey, we're able to drive to Baghdad, Mosul, whatnot. But then, of course, we had IEDs, we had, insurrection that we're trying to, put down and whatnot. There was a major Marine general, God, I can't remember his name, but he said he expects that for the Russians to hold Kyiv, when comparing it to Fallujah had 3,000 buildings in that city, and it took us 3 weeks to essentially pacify it. And he says that Kyiv has 30,000 buildings. That network, that infrastructure that's in there, where you can move around without being noticed, that's going to wreak havoc on an occupying force.
All right. So all fair points. All fair points. One, sanctions are going to hurt the Russian people. I don't know that they're ever going to hurt the oligarchy. Now, I'll be surprised if I'm wrong on that, but I don't think it'll hurt the multi-billionaire oligarchy. I mean, 15% is 15% on the oligarchy too, but when you have 11 billion, 15% just doesn't hurt that much. Second thing, I absolutely agree with you that I do not like the Russian doctrine of ad hoc, but we're pretending back here in our Western world, we're looking at Russian doctrine, which, by the way, to be fair, I'm authored in for the U.S. military. And we're looking at going, wow, they're doing this all wrong. No, they're doing it exactly to their doctrine. There's no surprises here. Those seemingly ad hoc, which they are ad hoc, guess what the Russians call that? They call that, they have a term for that. It's task organization to the mission. And so while it's sloppy and I don't like it, the fact is that's how they've always done work, at least since World War II. How fast are they going? We can compare them to European invasions, NATO, US invasions, and I admit it's slower, but not significantly slower. But let's not do that. Let's not compare them apples to oranges. How about we compare them apples to apples? That is, let's compare the Russians to the Russian invasion of Germany, the Russian invasion of Chechnya, the Russian invasion of Georgia, the Russian invasion of Syria, and now the Russian invasion of Ukraine. They're right on schedule. They're not even late, not a day late. This is how slow they go because they have a different doctrine in us that is a double pincer movement, seize the city, and then level it. When they violated their own doctrine in 1994 in Chechnya, they not only lost the battle horrifically, they lost the war. They came back 6 years later, followed their doctrine, reduced Chechnya to rubble, and won. So while this looks painstakingly slow to us, this is exactly Russian doctrine.
Which goes to the point that they don't care about the death of civilians. And so, I mean, there's this whole thing of, oh, they're not targeting civilians. Yes, they are targeting civilians. They are doing that, level, burn it all down approach.
Let's have somebody else jump in there.
I kind of want to take a different approach with this. You guys talked about post-occupation, and that may be where we really see resistance. The problem is this war is still in its infancy. Every day Russia destroys stuff. They're making enemies of the Ukrainian people. Ukraine is obviously preparing for total war. They have essentially a foreign legion. They're bringing in fighters all the time. Let's say Russia wins. What does the post-occupation look like? It's not going to be pretty, regardless of what their doctrine is. I'm reading a book right now on Soviet counterinsurgency in Ukraine during the 1940s and 1950s. And it was pretty brutal, and that's what these people are known for. Doc, I agree with you. This is their doctrine. Inching. That's exactly what they did to Grozny. They inched in or shelled the hell out of it, and that was it. Ukraine is a little more capable than Chechnya, I would argue, and I think they're poking a hornet's nest essentially. So I think the real war will begin in a post-occupation. I think you're right, Russia will win, but Michael may be onto something, that there may be a real war starting in a post-occupation or during an occupation.
I think both of those, Doc and Michael, have some very valid points. I'm sure the Russians are going per their doctrine, but there's no question it's not going entirely as planned, right? We saw airborne assaults on airports that got repulsed. We've seen streets littered with Russian armor. We've seen the Ukrainians still maintaining a viable air defense, as well as carrying out UAV strikes on Russian columns and equipment and staging areas. I mean, why the Russians haven't established air superiority is beyond me. So it's definitely not going as planned, I would think. That's my opinion right there.
Yeah, I'll agree with you
I'll
on
pull
that.
up on that, Brent. I
Go for
think
it,
it's a
Joe.
combination of the Russians didn't expect the resistance that they got from the Ukrainians, and I think the Russians might have overestimated their own capabilities because they haven't really been tested like that combat-wise. They were in Syria and stuff, but not to this level. I think they even bought in to the world hype of the big bad Russian boogeyman. And as such, they thought it'd just be a cakewalk to go in there. The Ukrainians said, hey, don't forget, we get to say so in this as well. And now they're having issues. I also think Doc's right. The Russians typically don't take ground like we do. It's a slow, methodical grind for them. They don't have the aversion to losing like we do. They didn't in World War II. They would just throw waves and waves at the Germans with actually fairly poor strategic maneuvers and just war of attrition. I mean, look, going back to the Cold War, how did they plan on dealing with us during the Cold War? They thought that outnumbering us 30-1 tank-wise was going to be their way of doing it. They didn't care if they lost 2/3 of those. It's a totally different mindset and doctrine and everything, but I think that if they do completely take things like the discussion's going, I think you're right. You're going to see some really, really nasty potential insurgency involved after the fact. That's when it'll get ugly.
Hey, Brent, can I do a shameless plug? Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead. And then I know Les was waiting.
All right. So, guys, the book I'm referring to is Op4 Smart Book 3 by the Lightning Press. There's a 2013 version. That's kind of nicer if you can get your hands on it. It's a full color. And then the 2018 version, which is black and white. But it's Tactics and Operations of Red Team Armies. And let me say that while, I and then Lieutenant Colonel Norm Wade is the technical editor here. Look, we don't make this up. It's not the world according to us because we said so. No, it's actually a review of, not only traditional red team armies, which the Soviet doctrine is, that's the core doctrine there, but also existing, about a half a dozen other existing. If you go to page 415, you'll see this little gem, and that's the red team army doctrine of UW, unconventional warfare. And so what happens, and it's a scale. So let me describe that without, here's what happens. You go into this place called Crimea overnight after you seize political favors and you seize assurance from the enemy's navy that they actually want to be part of your force. You have everybody rip off their insignia, off their uniforms, and take it off of their vehicles. You spend days doing this. Then you roll in one night and you say, oh, well, it's not us. It's not the Russian army that's there. And then, within about 72 hours, You put your patches back on, you shake hands with the Navy, the mayor welcomes you in with kisses and flowers, and you say, oh, we're here. Now, that's at the lowest end of that corner going up like that. At about midway up, you surround the city of Kiev, and you start leveling it with artillery, and it continues to go. All right, guys? So this is their doctrine. It's not new. You saw this in Hungary. You saw this in Poland, in the 50s and the 60s and early 70s. And we've seen it time and time again. Crimea is not the first time. Neither is Ukraine. Well, we're going in as peacekeepers, you see. Oh, did I say peacekeepers? I mean full-fledged war. So there's a predictable pattern, not only a historical pattern, but what they actually train in terms of tactics, operations, and strategy. And so I'm telling you, you can say, well, I'm surprised. I don't blame you. I don't blame anybody for being surprised. They have a different doctrine than us. And it doesn't, Crimea is part of their doctrine, not unique. Oh my gosh, how weird. They went in without, without insignia and didn't claim to be Russians till they were there for 3 to 5 days. That's very much part of their doctrine. We don't have that. We recognize that as unethical, immoral, illegal. That's called military training in Russia. All right? So we can look at theirs and scratch our head, and all these Westerners, all these Europeans and North Americans say, oh, I understand Red Team Army doctrine. I went to the Red Team Army school, you see. And we can say we do, and then as soon as we see it, we're going, what the hell is that? Well, that's not right. That doesn't look like what I think it should look like. Okay, but looks like everything else we've seen come from these people.
All good points. But, I really honestly think this has not gone according to plan for the Russians. In no point do you sit there and have that big, long-ass stalled convoy for that long. That's not part of any plan. Not having air dominance, that's not part of any plan. They seem to have real trouble coordinating air-ground operations. They seem to have real trouble deconflicting and stuff. They are not using their stuff in a coordinated manner. A simple thing like weather seems to be stalling an entire amphibious operation. And I know
all of it, not just the amphibious side, the northern and the eastern attacks as well. Weather is just but that's where you're going to. I agree with you. First off, I agree, Les. Let me say that I agree that clearly they were hoping for a Crimea situation where they would be welcome. Yeah, they were. And there's no doubt in my mind. And if you look at their doctrine, that's what they're told to expect. Almost like, unless you know that it's not going to happen, go softly, softly. And if that doesn't happen, then task organize. So what I see them doing is task organizing in a mud season on pavement. But I also see really sloppy professionalism, which is kind of what I expect from the Russian army.
Yeah, but maybe we're spoiled here in the West, but I'm sure we've all seen that video of that one tank column getting ambushed where the lead tank, the rear tank got hit, clearly javelin type ordnance or the equivalent, I think they call it the Spagan over there. Heavy anti-tank weapons, something designed definitely got to kill both tanks brewed up. And then something to akin on the NLAW RPG-7 level just picks off the middle. And I mean, you see it all happen in a 3-minute video. I mean, I don't think anybody on this panel wouldn't say that wasn't textbook perfect.
Oh no, it was. You're talking about the one inside the city, right? But did you see the one? Did you see the one on the highway, on the superhighway, where they do the same thing? And what do the Russians do? They turn, dismount, blast, and overrun the Ukrainians. Just kill them. They killed them all, and it's on wonderful UAV. You're seeing it, and it's like finally. But we're not being shown that, Les. And I don't blame anybody for not showing us. I'm not saying
nobody's going to show their failures. I mean, we're seeing the best of the best, but the point of it is like that textbook ambush. The reason that textbook ambush worked is the Soviets, let's call them what they are, Soviets, were being textbook stupid.
Yeah. They don't trust their tactical unit commanders very often. And this is the weakness. Look, I'm not heralding task organization by mission as a good thing. To me, this always seemed disastrous. and we say this as Americans, when you step out on a patrol, mounted or dismounted, everybody's either an asset or a liability. It just comes down to that. Are you an asset? Do you bring something to this fight, or are you a liability? And if you're a liability, get the hell off of my patrol, right? I don't need you here. You're going to get us killed. You want to see a movie about it, a real simple film, watch 84 two guys join a reconnaissance patrol and pretty much get everybody killed because they are liabilities, not assets. So this is a very American way of thinking about combat. But Russians say, you're speaking 6 different languages. You barely know each other. You communicate through battle drill. I can put any of you platoons together and form a task force, put a major in charge of it, and send you down the road. They see it as their strength. I see it as their weakness. I'm not arguing it's good. I'm saying it's their doctrine.
Hey, fellas, I want to jump in real quick and try to reorient us back to the original topic, which is the the Polish MIGs. And I know we got kind of down a rabbit hole talking about the current situation in Ukraine and how it's unfolding, and that's quite fine. I know a lot of people in the comments are really interested in that. But I do want to specifically address the MIG deal, right? Do we think that these MIGs will actually make a difference?
Yeah, absolutely. If the current state of the Ukrainian Air Force, the fact that it even still exists right now is amazing. And if they're keeping the Russians from establishing air superiority, then adding 24 MiGs to the thing, which will probably increase the Ukrainian Air Force at this point, probably by 50%. Yeah, that will have a hell of a difference. And like I said in my rant at the beginning of this, if we're littering this country with anti-tank missiles and other weapons, and that's not pissing Vlad off, 24 MiGs ain't going to do it either.
I think it will certainly prolong the war, and that needs to be the Ukrainian strategy at this point, is to prolong this as long as possible. So anything we can do to help them do that, that's what we need to do.
Absolutely.
Spot on. And I will, you know what, Les, here's why I think the Russians don't want to. Okay, so your question, Brent, was, will it help? Not only will it help, all of NATO knows it will help, and that's why they're terrified of doing it. Look, it doesn't just help, as Chad say, prolong the war, and as Les says, deny air dominance to Russia. It can do one other thing. It gives Ukraine Air Force the power to strike Russian air bases in Belarus and Russia. Think about that. Holy crap. What happens if Ukraine has the air power to strike back into Russia? And I'm not talking Russian people. I'm talking the air bases. It makes Russia move their air bases farther back for protection, out of strike range, and exhaust those pilots long before they ever hit Ukrainian airspace, right? And so that's what you're looking for. Yeah, it absolutely makes an impact. And this is why NATO is, frankly, undecided about giving them.
Wait, you're saying that you said that NATO doesn't want to help the Ukrainians. That's why they don't want to give the MiGs?
Yeah, think about it, Michael. It makes perfect sense on one level.
Mm-hmm.
Why do they not want to help them? Are you sure there's not other things being considered as to why that deal was perhaps scuttled?
I mean, don't get me wrong.
That was a rhetorical. Well, it was a semi-rhetorical question, but
no,
you guys don't think that would further escalate the entire theater of operations there?
That's it. Wait, you just hit it. So there are other
exactly.
issues. Michael, there are issues. There are, hey, are we crossing our T's and dotting our I's on our alliance? I think that there's absolutely that. There's economic issues. There's, shifting power issues. Let's not make this like, oh, it's so simple. It's not. It's a complex issue. Right. But I think ultimately, the biggest fear is an expansion of the war. Like Putin has already said, I'm going to start closing off the Western corridors. He's been allowing that to stay open. I think, I'm being honest, I think the Russians have allowed the Western corridors to stay open because they've seen 2.7 million refugees flow out of there, and they want those civilians out of the way when they're leveling cities. This is the part that I think isn't true. I don't think they are targeting civilians. They're targeting infrastructure, homes, businesses, everything you could think. They want cities bombed.
And who lives in homes and businesses? I mean, you just said that their whole doctrine is to level the thing. Well, I mean, people got to live in buildings, so they're leveling it.
You're right, and they're
civilians are
willing
gonna
to
get
level. And Michael, I'm not trying to parse words. They're willing to level it. Russians, I suspect, are willing to level it with humans in there, with non-combatants in there. But what they really want is the non-combatants to be refugees, get out, and then level an empty city with nothing but soldiers in it. That's what they desire. But either way, no, I think you're right. I think NATO is terrified, Michael. I think NATO is terrified of expanding this war into the EU, because then they're committed to it, right? And then God knows what.
Right. So the scenario being, and this is a question that I have for everyone. So the scenario being like, all right, so Poland wants to send the MIGs, but they want to send it from Ramstein Air Force Base, right? Okay. So you're Russia. We do that deal. All right. We give them F-16s in exchange, but really the big check there is that it's a NATO air base that is sending that are fueling those planes, sending them off over to Ukraine. What do you think? How do you think Putin is going to react to that? Do we call his bluff? That he's not going to do anything? That he's not going to wait? The sleeping giant as Japan did with Pearl Harbor, or is he like, I got no fucks to give?
But what's the big difference between those aircraft and the Stingers, the Javelins, the NLAWs?
Because it's another level. It's a higher level of escalation. I mean, a jet for a Stinger or MRAW. I'm sorry, I might just lost the word there. That's in a local vicinity. You have to be right there. You have to have eyes on target. A jet gives you a whole big theater of operation. You can be hundreds of miles away and then make an impact, make an attack. So it escalates the level of lethality of the tools that we're giving them. Just same thing as obviously the Taliban doesn't have an air force, but let's just say, the Russians have supplied the Taliban with Stingers, or their version of anti-tank, anti-air, against us. We did against them 10 years, 20 years before that. It's always a tit for tat that we've done during the Cold War. But when you're bringing planes into it, that's an entirely
here's where I'm going to disagree with you, brother, because the Secretary of State and the U.S. were all on board with this, right? When it was going to be Poland giving the planes to the Ukrainians
directly from a Polish air base,
right? But Poland
it was Poland acting unilaterally, and them doing it from like the Polish Air Force, not necessarily from like a NATO air base, which puts that slight twist. I know, it's kind of like lawyer speak. Like, well, like who who cares? The end of result is the same.
Lawyer speak, right there.
Right. But in the geopolitical realm of the language, that matters, because then it gives Putin the reason, if he were to take it, if he wanted to take it, of saying like, oh, see, NATO, because he's already done the propaganda part. He already has the Russian people believing that the Russians are the defenders. They're coming in and rescuing. And here's the big bad West now giving planes to the enemy, the Ukrainian government, to attack Russian soldiers. That's the difference.
This is exactly what Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said. He said the U.S. is actively working a deal with Poland to deliver those aircraft to Ukraine. So I don't see the difference here from Ukrainian pilots coming to Poland, picking up those planes and flying them out, or them going to Ramstein Air Force Base and picking them up from us. Both two NATO allies. I don't see the difference. I think our higher levels on the U.S. side, once it became like, oh, wait a minute, you're picking them up from our base now? Like, now they're coming up with some BS when originally they said that, hey, we're all on board with this.
Why would they say yes and then no? Like, why would they change their mind? If everything that's been done to date has been like, with frankly the U.S. leading it in terms of gathering the EU, having this economic blockade, that has gone well beyond anything that we've seen in recent memory. And providing sneakers, providing billions of dollars or millions of dollars in aid, then what would be the other reason to have this like sudden change of heart to offer the exchange and then not? Because to me, it doesn't seem like, being like hesitant or tepid about it. I mean, everything to me, or everything that I've seen thus far has been a very strong, quick response from the West.
Deniability. Putin's ticked off about all the small arms going in there. No doubt about that. But that stuff's quite honestly a dime a dozen in the world for real. There's no way that they could legit say, here's where the United States provided all of these Stingers and anti-tank weapons, etc. That would be really hard to prove because we could simply say, no, we didn't. Some other country that we sold them to must have gave them to them. But being directly involved in the MIG deal, that's something that would be almost impossible to deny. And I'd be willing to say Putin probably said, y'all do that. I'm going to consider that an open, overt act, and I'm going to take it out on all of you. And he called our bluff to a point, and they had to hold up and say, well, wait a minute, maybe we need to rethink this a little bit. Because that's a lot harder thing to try to deny that you were involved with versus a bunch of, Stingers and AT4s, whatever else we're, putting in over there.
But we're not denying it. It's public. I'm sorry to interrupt you, John, but it's public knowledge. We've admitted that we're giving those arms. The British Ministry of Defense has also given their equivalent.
I'm not denying it. I'm saying the MIGs would be what he would use to justify it with. He's not willing to make that big leap over the small stuff, but something like MIGs, straight up fighter jets, I think in his mind that would be what he would say. Okay, yep, that's a bridge too far. That's crossing an open line that he would feel more justified in retaliating for.
I think another question that has to be asked is, does Russia have the ability to deal with planes? And they do. They have surface-to-air missiles. They have anti-aircraft weapons. The question was asked earlier, will this make a difference? Yes, it will to a certain extent, but I think eventually, if Russia continues down this path, they will take out planes. The Ukrainian Air Force will be diminished again. But I want to talk about Putin for a minute. Putin keeps coming up. Now, I'm definitely not naive enough to call Putin a paper tiger, but I read an article today that he's put personal sanctions on members of the U.S. government, and it almost seems somewhat childish for somebody to do that. It seems like a desperate move, a desperate political move. Like, well, you're putting sanctions on me. Well, I'm going to do the same to you. It's like, these idiots with their cell phones going around recording, and they're recording somebody else, and that person pulls out their cell phone. Well, I can record you too. I really don't think we know what Putin's going to do. He's definitely, pulling out the nuclear weapons and stuff like that. Is it a bluff? I don't know. It seems like a bluff. Of course, I don't want to be the one to, say it is a bluff and it turns out not to be. But there's a lot of escalation going on here, a lot of chest pounding and stuff like that going on here. So I really don't think we know at this point. And like I said earlier, this war is still in its infancy. It's only, how long has it been? A month at the most. 2 months. But anyway, it's still in its infancy. We don't know what's going to happen. We can't read his mind. I think Putin is cold and calculating. He's a KGB man. I don't think he's stupid, but I think there's a little bit of stuff here going on that's like, maybe he's bluffing. I don't know. He's certainly entered in that gray area.
Yeah, I was saying 2 weeks. It's the actual fighting has been going on 2 weeks. But you're right. It's the buildup has been months. So there's that. I think the MIG issue is simply this, and we've all, John has said it. Everybody's kind of dancing around it. The MIG issue is more about optics, but it does have a practical aspect too. What I mean by optics is just as what John said. He'll draw a line somewhere. Putin will draw a line. He can say, okay, you cannot give Ukraine nuclear weapons. I don't know, or can't give them flamethrowers, or you can't give them MREs. It doesn't matter what it is. He's got to draw a line on something. And so he's, that's the big issue is, are the MiGs going to be crossing that line? So there's one thing. The other practical aspect, other than arbitrary, I'm drawing a line in the sand. The practical aspect is that the MiGs are not a defensive posture. They're not a defensive weapon. Anti-tank is a defensive weapon. And as Michael said, it's an area weapon. Anti-air is a defensive weapon for the most part, and it's an area weapon. It's a local area weapon. MiGs give him the ability to strike deep into Russia. And so they're an offensive weapon. But more so, anytime Putin decides his army is shutting down the western corridor of Ukraine, that is the outflowing of refugees and the inflowing of help, anytime he decides to shut that down, he can shut down those land corridors. But MiGs aren't land bound. MiGs are not land bound. And so he can't shut that down if everybody's giving his Air Force MiGs and training them in Germany and sending them to strike in Russia. And so I think it does escalate. From a weapon system, it truly does escalate the theater of operations. And where America was like, oh, yeah, Poland, good on you. As soon as Poland said, right, now you give it to them. Then America was like, whoa, hold on, wait. Look at this. Let's go back to simple law, right? We've all had some kind of basic law education. And that is this. Your buddy comes to you in the middle of the night and he's like, I'm so angry at my wife. And I think I want to kill her. Let me borrow your shotgun. Are you going to give him the shotgun when he's drunk, angry, and swearing that he's going to kill his wife? You're culpable. Right? It's not the same thing as when your buddy comes over to you and says, I might go quail hunting, in 2 weeks with my uncle. Can I borrow your shotgun? Total different premise. And so for us to go, yeah, unilaterally, Poland's doing the right thing and America loved that. Yay! Here, America, you get involved and get culpability all over your hands. I think that's when America backed out. We blinked. These aren't our allies. We're over here still crossing T's and dotting I's going, well, technically they're not our friends and we're not going to help the Ukrainians. And this disgusts me. But it's a reality. So that's where I am.
Take the easy way out. Give the MiGs to Moldova. What the Moldovans do with them, that's up to them.
Hey, there he is.
Who tagged Bruce?
Do the Ukrainians even have pilots to fly the MiGs if they got them, though?
Yeah, most air forces that I know of in the world have way more pilots than they have planes. They all share them. That's why in the U.S. military, pilots don't get their names on the plane. The crew chief does. So, yeah, they've got pilots. Not only that, we could set up a training pipeline. It'd be fairly easy. Matter of fact, one of the things I think I'd like to see happen is a modern-day equivalent of the Flying Tigers.
Hey, Bruce, why don't you jump in here because we're almost done with this conversation before we move on to the next one. So once you get your piece of the pie here.
Yeah, well, I hope you guys are ready. You better buckle up because I got a little something to say about this. I'm not sure what you all have covered before, so hopefully I'm not hashing the same old stuff over and over again. But let me tell you something. When I was growing up in the 80s, we always had these Polak jokes, right? We were always making fun of the Polacks. And back where I grew up, I'm going to tell you, man, that no one knew a Polak. We didn't have anything but whites and blacks where I grew up. It was not an international country. I'm just telling you, or state where I was from. I'm just telling you. So it was okay to make fun of the Polacks because there wasn't any Poles that could be offended about it. But we probably got a few here. So you guys, y'all might want to take a break, go get a drink or something because I'm about to let you have it. Let me tell you something. You guys want to act all tough about giving these MiGs to Ukraine, and then when it's time to give it to them, you can't get the MiGs over there? Are you kidding me? I mean, what? Let me explain to you about the logistical issue here with the Poles and these MiGs. You've got Poland, and Poland is between two countries. Poland is between Ukraine and Germany. Now, these Poles, they decide that they want to get MiGs from Poland to Ukraine. So do they fly them over to Ukraine? Do they have Ukrainian pilots come over and fly them over just across the border? Nah. Do they pull the wings off of them and load them on a truck and drive them over? No. Do they pull the wings off of them and put them on a train and ship them over? No. These geniuses want to fly them backwards to a different country, land them in another country, and then send them back over Poland to get to Ukraine. This is ridiculous, guys. Come on. That's not how things are done, all right? If you want to get it to a country, then you just move it over there, all right? If I've got something in Texas and I need to ship it to Mexico, I send it straight south. I don't send it north through Canada to then make its way back around to Mexico and involve the Canadians. So, Polacks, you're either just as dumb as all the jokes have ever been, or you're scared and afraid to go out on your own, have some balls, and donate that equipment to Ukraine. Secondly, I'm not going to exclude the United States from this either. We should be fighting over the opportunity to get these MIGs and send these MIGs to Poland. As soon as Poland said, hey, we're going to give Ukraine 50 MIGs, we should have pumped up our chest and said, oh, hell no. We're going to give them 100 F-16s. And Germany should have jumped up and said, we're going to give them 150 of our planes. And every Western country out there should have done everything they could to get more equipment into that country if possible. Let me tell you something. It's been a fantasy of mine my whole life to be able to kill commies, all right? And I think almost every one of us here can probably say that. A kill a commie for mommy was a T-shirt that I wore to school. Let me tell you guys something. We should be fighting over getting those MIGs to Ukraine and anything else that we can get them. Now, I get the idea that some people say, hey, we don't want to put boots on the ground, and I'm fine with that, okay? I think there's a lot we can do without actually putting boots on the ground. We could shut down the airspace over Ukraine. I think we could do it without putting boots on the ground. I think we could do it flying anti-air drones and using anti-air missiles from some pimple-faced kid in the Air Force that's in his mom's basement flying those things somewhere outside of California. You don't have to be in that country to create a huge impact on what's going on that country. All right, guys, that's my rant. I can tell Michael he can't take no more. His head's about to pop off. So I've said all I have to say, and I'm going to hand it back over to you guys. I do feel a lot better, though. Thank you for letting me vent.
Okay, Michael, you got to follow that up.
Bruce, only because you're making me laugh so hard is the reason my head's about to pop off. That was great. I love it. I only do these just for what Bruce says. So I did have a question. Thank you, Brent, for allowing me to answer it or ask it. And Bruce actually already answered it. But my question is to the panel: yes or no? Are you in favor of giving the MIGs to Ukraine, knowing it would result in a Russian attack on a U.S. NATO base or encampment somewhere outside of Ukraine?
We'll go around the horn with this because this will be the last response on this topic before we move into the next one. So let's go ahead and take it.
Yes, send the MIGs. Matter of fact, encourage the Bulgarians and the Romanians to send their MIGs. Promise to backfill them. Like I said at the beginning of my rant, there are plenty of F-16s sitting out in the desert of Arizona to backfill that order. And then I would go around the world and say, anybody got spare MIGs? Each MiG gets an F-16. Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, anything to prolong this war, Ukraine needs all the help they can get. I'm not sure Russia has the balls to attack NATO. I would be surprised if they did. They might do it and prove me wrong, but I'm not sure they do.
Send the MiGs, send the Flying Tigers, and train them on a sanctuary in NATO. Train the Ukrainian pilots in a sanctuary in NATO. Look, there's one more reason why America is willing to arm everybody else's citizen militia, but not our own. Look, goddammit, Les is right. We need the Flying Tigers over there. And the Flying Tigers weren't the United States Air Force, didn't even exist then. Those were private militia. And they're not the first or the last private Air Force to fight in a war. Send the MiGs, Send the American militia flying Tigers, and yes, we actually have them today, something like 120, 130,000 or 120 or 130 fighter aircraft that Les can tell you more about. Send them. Yes.
I don't particularly care one way or the other. I'm not rooting for either dog in this fight. I'm watching the two sketchy psychos duke it out, and I think the European countries need to do what European countries feel like they need to do, and we currently don't need to be getting involved.
I can't give a yes or no answer to my own question, which is terrible. Yes, in my heart, 100%. I want to do it. I want everyone to get involved and just go in there and get the Russians out and do what we need to do. The reason why I hesitate is because from a rational perspective of, all right, yes, people are dying, but if we do this and then Russia attacks us and then we have to send troops and it escalates to something further, how many more people are going to die? But, then I think about World War II and those same arguments being made. And even World War I, we had a very isolationist foreign policy of like, we don't need Europe. We don't need to deal with that. Let's not get involved. And with World War II, I mean, hindsight is 2020, right? One of the things is that it's such a tough call, and I can't answer my own question, which is terrible, but that's where I'm at.
Just in case you guys didn't know where I stand on this issue, send the MIGs. And it's not about the MIGs. I don't think that a handful of MIGs is going to make a hill of beans difference in this conflict at all. But if you're going to be a country and you're going to say, hey, I'm going to send them, then by God, you send them. And if you don't intend on sending them, you keep your whore mouth shut. It's just that simple. You didn't have to offer them. But now that you've offered them, you send them. You don't wait for them to take you up on your deal and then go, oh, no, wait. I didn't really mean what I said. You're a country. And when you say something officially, you should mean what you say. And you should already have it vetted, have a program in place, a logistical system of how you're going to get them there and what they're going to be doing when you get them there. You shouldn't just shoot off your mouth like I do here. If you're a government, that stuff should be vetted. And for those of you who are saying, oh, that would escalate the war and Russia has nukes. Okay, well, we have one of two options here. One option is get involved and help keep the war there. The other option is send a blank notebook to Vladimir Putin and say, tell us what you want. And whatever you want, you're going to get because you're a nuclear country. And because you're a nuclear country, we're so fearful of your guys' threats on anything, you get anything you want. You want our kids, you want our women? Okay, just remind us you got nukes and we'll send them all over there. Just capitulate to every wish that they got because that's what's coming next.
All right, I'll finish this up and then we'll transition to the next one. So I am all for the MIGs. Think Korea, think Vietnam. Soviets at that time were providing not only fighters, but at some pilots flying against our aircraft. I mean, this has been going on for generations, guys. And if you've been watching these live streams, I can't even begin to remember how many times I've said over and over, oh, I thought we should work with the Russians in Syria and we should have better relations with the Russians. Well, that was back then. Now it's a different ballgame. This is not the Russia I was thinking was fighting in Syria. They've taken this to another level. We were clearly back in the Cold War, guys, and we didn't sit on our ass and capitulate with the Russians back then. It was we win, they lose. And if that means facilitating the giving of MIGs from Poland to Ukraine, we need to do that. I don't care if that's Ukrainian pilots coming to Poland, but clearly Poland has made the conscious decision that, hey, we got the Russians on our doorstep. We would like to pass these MIGs off to the United States to facilitate this. You know what? I don't give a shit. I think we should facilitate it regardless. And Putin knows damn well that if he attacks a NATO country, it's ball game. Okay. Well, guess what? We have nukes too. If you want to take it to nuclear war, it's mutually assured destruction there, buddy. If you want to go out with a bang, well, guess what? It's bang all the way around. So, it is what it is. The only thing that man respects is strength. And obviously he's made the conscious decision that there is not strength on our side of the aisle. And that's why we're seeing all this crap unfolding. And again, if we don't, it is my opinion that if we don't stop this in Ukraine, and I'm not talking about American boots on the ground, but the sending of weapons to let the Ukrainians fend off Big Red Bear, if we don't put a strong front forward here, this is going to only escalate in other parts of the world. Taiwan, Korea, you name it. Yeah. All right. So with that being said, guys, I want to transition into our next topic, and that is rising gas prices in the United States. And this has obviously only been exaggerated by the current events in Russia. But, I mean, we've been seeing these gas prices go up since the Biden administration came into office. So I do not believe the narrative that this is all Putin's fault, like the president said the other day. Because, like I said, this has been going up for a while, but it obviously has just blown up since this war in Ukraine kicked off. So I want to kick that around, guys, and get your thoughts on it. So let's, again, go around the horn. I'll start with Les, and let's hear your thoughts, brother.
Well, as owning a logistics company with my own trucks, I have noticed the price of fuel going up. It is impacting, trust me. But let's be honest, that I did that sticker that you're seeing on every freaking gas pump now, that's been going on for months. I first noticed it when we had our great convoy out to the 40th anniversary, started seeing it on the pumps on the way out there and got a chuckle out of it. But now they're on the pumps here in Leesburg, Virginia, in the middle of the bluest blue, Loudoun County. It's undeniable. The prices are up. I never seen fuel this high. And it ain't all Putin. I mean, whether he is just 2 or 3% of our oil usage, like the government's saying, you know, how much is it really? Do we really know? 2%, we can take a hit. But 2% didn't drive this spike in prices. This spike was driven because of the agenda of our current government that is anti-fossil fuel, or really anything. Because think about it. It's anti-power anything. You want to build a nuclear power plant? They'll stop you there. You want to do something else? They'll stop you there. Hell, they even stop solar because it's bad for the birds. People will complain about the noise of wind turbines. People here, this government is anti-energy across the board. And this is the effect when you have to buy your energy from a nation that is hostile to you.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to really top that. I only have one question. Why are we dependent on Russian oil in the first place? Whose bright idea was that? Shame on our political class for even getting us involved with the Russians and buying their oil in the first place. When we have the ability to produce it here, Canada is the next major exporter. Shame on our political class. That's all I've got to say.
Putting economic sanctions on Russia. Just look at a map of the world, guys. Just look at how much territory and how many people that are there. Just take for a minute, look and try to understand the scope and the percentage of the population and the landmass that is the Russian Federation. Now, I'm going to go to you and I'm going to say, I'm angry at you. I'm going to take a piss in your side of the bathtub, but I'm not pissing on my own side in that same bathtub. This is kind of the insanity of saying, I'm going to do economic sanctions. I'm not even necessarily, don't misunderstand. I'm not saying I'm against economic sanctions. That's not what I'm saying. Although they have anemic and very slow, impact. So I question their merit, but I'm not entirely against economic sanctions. Why would you think that pissing on the opposite side of the bathtub you're sitting in
Well, the gas prices is pretty simple. Let's go, Brandon. The day after he takes office, he starts undoing and shutting down all the things that Trump did to help get us to the point that we were at, where prices were so low. The strategic reserves were full, and for the first time in forever, we were actually exporting oil. In a matter of a couple of weeks, he completely undid all that, reversed it, sent it spiraling the other direction. He sold, I forget how many millions of barrels from the strategic reserve to China, to other places. My only question at this point, is it absolute complete incompetency or is it intentional? And I have a strong leaning currently towards it being intentional.
All right, so a quick little reason as to why there's inflation and the oil prices have gone up. From a local perspective, it doesn't have anything to do with the United States not being able to procure oil. We do supply ourselves for the most part. The big majority of our oil comes from ourselves. It's the fact that even though we have easy access to oil, it's that the market as a whole dictates what the price is going to be. And so because you've shut off the spigot, so to speak, for the European Union, that has an effect on our oil that we drill here in Texas. So it doesn't necessarily have to do with a supply and demand locally. It has to do with the supply demand globally. And that's what kicks up prices. And that's the decision that that President Biden made when doing the oil embargo. It's not necessarily for us. It's, again, an economic hit on Russia because that is their sole source of money after all the other sanctions. And that's why the EU, as I mentioned earlier, isn't doing a full just cutoff of that oil supply. They're going to slowly wean themselves off. But the administration has also made entreaties to OPEC to help pump out more oil to offset that and get prices down. There's been some talk of even revising the nuclear deal with Iran that President Trump had taken us out of, and maybe bringing that in to where they can pump some oil out, and we actually allow that to go in the market to help get down prices. I've also heard of Venezuela, question whether or not morally we should do that. That is certainly a question to be asked. As to inflation, okay, the inflation aspect doesn't necessarily have to do either just with oil prices. Inflation has been occurring since the pandemic began. Why did it occur? Well, the COVID started, right? The entire economy from a manufacturing perspective essentially shut down. Everyone got sent home. No one's able to, factories aren't able to run. We're trying to figure out what's going on. Well, people get sent home to work. And then there's a huge demand for products from home because everyone's like, hey, I'm going to redo my office. I'm going to redo my kitchen. This is where I work from. And then there's this huge demand for products and it can't be fed because there's no one on the manufacturing side. And that's what started the rise in prices. And then, of course, with the oil aspect, that's just like further exacerbated it. If you guys remember the last time that I was on, I said, hey, would you be in favor of doing this, knowing that gas prices are going to jump up? So if you said yes to that question, then this is what it is. And I understand that it hurts. It does hurt. It fucking sucks. But you can't say that you want you don't want the current administration to pussyfoot around in terms of dealing with Russia, but then chastise them on the back end for rising oil prices when that's a result of them hitting them economically. And Doc, you said like you feel like sanctions are slow taken. I mean, the ruble's dropped by like 30% to the dollar. Knowing the value's absolutely plummeted. So in this case, I feel like it's had an immediate effect. Now on the oligarchy, yeah, that's going to take a little bit longer because they have billions of dollars, but you cut off that revenue from that oil, and suddenly oligarchs are like, hey, this Putin guy's not doing too well for me. I'm hurting. Time to start looking for another president that can.
All right, so just to address what Michael said, I was one of those guys that said that I'd be willing to pay a little bit more at the pump in order to put these sanctions on Russia, and I stand by that. Now, in a very selfish response, I honestly don't drive very much. I live about 8 miles from work, and my wife works from home, and our fuel costs, fortunately for us, are relatively low directly. Now, we're paying inflationary prices on everything because, as we've said before, everything comes by trucks, and trucks are thirsty beasts. They drink a lot of fuel, and those costs are handed back down to the consumer. So we're kind of all in this together on that aspect. But the reasoning behind me being willing to do that wasn't because I necessarily wanted to see just sanctions happen to Russia. Yes, that's part of it. But the other part was that I'd be willing to pay a little bit more at the pump if this would ensure that Democrats lose control of the House, Senate, and presidency. So let's not forget that that's the reasoning, one of the big reasons behind why I'm willing to pay a little bit more, because I think in the end that I'll make all that money back if we can get some Republicans to take control, and if a small percentage of those Republicans can help turn the economy around and help me make a little bit more money and bring that inflation back down and bring that those fuel costs back down. So temporary pain, hopefully for a more long-term solution. It's a gamble. I don't know. But to me, it's win-win. If on one hand, we're hitting Russia with sanctions, and then on the other hand, we're getting Democrats out of office, that works. That works for me. I want to just talk a little bit about the Democrats' idea, I think, and how we kind of got here. And a lot of this has to do with these Going Green initiatives. We've heard about them for years. Democrats have always tried to push those, and it seems like Republicans have always sort of pushed back. But here's the thing. Anytime that there are subsidies in an industry, what that means is that industry is a failing business model. And I can speak from experience. My dad was a farmer in the 80s. And I don't know if you guys remember Farm Aid and John Cougar Mellencamp and all of his concerts and all that stuff trying to save the farmers. Farmers were being given all these subsidies because they weren't being profitable, because they had, honestly, shitty business models. And my dad was one of those. And it was unfortunate, and it only delayed the inevitable. Eventually, he had to get out of the farming industry and went into the aircraft industry, where he ended up being extremely successful. But farming wasn't for him, and it's not for everybody. And anytime there's a business with big subsidies, I question the validity of that business model behind it. And a lot of businesses don't get those subsidies. Let me tell you something. Everybody's got one of these. iPhone. This was a great idea. And when this great idea was released, everybody wanted one, and everybody's now got one. Apple doesn't need subsidies. They invented something that everybody wanted, and everybody went out and bought it. Now, back around to green energy, I don't have a problem with solar cars or windmills on top of cars, as long as that source of energy is cheaper, more reliable, more available, more durable. In every way, people are going to flock to it. You don't need anything else. People will want that. They'll buy those cars by the droves, because it's better all around. But until that happens, and we're a long ways from it, There's no sense in trying to force our economy to convert to those, which we are subsidizing, and get rid of all of our oil capabilities. That's what put us in the situation that we're in now. Michael's right. We're beholden to a whole bunch of bad people that want to sell us oil. But why? Why are we doing that? How do we find ourselves here? Whenever you ask the current government why we're in that situation, and we talk about things like Keystone Pipeline, or we talk about things like drilling oil here, the answer is always the same. Well, that wouldn't have an effect for a couple of years. Well, no shit, Sherlock. But if we had been doing it a couple of years back, we would be there now. That's always the case. We should have been doing that all along. That's where I stand on the whole
thing. Hey, sorry, I'm sitting here watching this moron Patrick Henry post comment after comment saying, "When are you guys going to Ukraine?" Hey, you freaking retard! Every single one of us in here, with the exception of Bruce, and is a combat veteran of a foreign war. So you can just suck my ass. I mean, literally, this guy is in here talking shit, and he's like, "I'm young, blah 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 blah, boomer this, boomer that." That just tells me right there that he hasn't served a day of his life in the U.S. military. So you can kiss my ass, brother. Fucking retard. I'm sick of the gas prices. We need to turn on American power, whatever that entails. Just like Bruce said, turn on American energy. We have more resources than the Arabs, Russia, all of them combined. Freaking, we need to drill as much as we can. You want to do green stuff? Invest in that if you can, but don't hamper the other aspects of energy until your solar crap and all the green crap is producing vehicles that are affordable, that everybody can do and use, and it completely replaces the combustion engine. And then, that will be the day that maybe you can start looking at tampering some other stuff down. But in the meantime, we shouldn't be hampering our own ability to be just an economic powerhouse when it comes to drilling and everything else. So that's what I got to say about that. Open the floor, guys.
Wait, I want to say something. Not only do I agree, I've been sitting here quietly going, I'm not going to say it, but now that you've opened the door, Brent, it's time to start lobbing heads over here and some of the yahoos over here. Hey, you go, dude. Already went. And then I became a mercenary and went to the next war. Which war? How many times do I have to go to war to prove it to you? And you're saying, well, you should go to Ukraine. I'm looking to go to Ukraine, jackass. What are you doing, you little coward, playing with your little pud in the corner? I am looking to go to Ukraine, shithead. You're a coward. Anyway, on to energy. It's not a this or that. We're being offered with a logical fallacy, a false dichotomy. You got to choose green renewable energies, which I'm all for. And I say that in a patronizing voice, I know, but I actually am for. I'm for renewable. Hey, hydroelectric, thermal, solar, wind. I like it. I like all of it. Let's do it. Every time it's analyzed, every single time it's analyzed, they say two things about it. One, it's not enough to meet our needs. And number two, it has a huge environmental impact. So it's really not significantly better than oil. And many people say it's much worse than oil, but it doesn't matter because we're going oil, renewable, lies, nuclear. Nuclear is the cleanest. Nuclear is the most powerful. Nuclear is the most renewable. Nuclear. Star Trek. I love Star Trek. I love Star Trek too. By the way, the drive, flying through space and faster than light. Nuclear. It's all nuclear. It's why the Vulcans saw us and came here. Oh, look, they've harnessed nuclear. I mean, even in science fiction, nuclear is the answer.
All right. So since the green thing was opened up or whatnot, first off, Doc, so you're saying you want a nuclear reactor in every car? Is that what we're talking about?
No, I want nuclear reactors in my battery. If I grab my pen light battery and go, burp, I want nuclear everything. I want my pen to fly me faster than light.
Nuclear sex robots, Doc?
Yes.
You're crazy. I will not stand here and listen to this.
I want nuclear in my phone. I hate charging this thing. You come up with a nuclear powered phone, it's the next $1 billion idea.
All right. So
for the record, I got power played by Michael. He mentioned sex robots before I did. Dang it.
Damn it. Got me on it. All right. So you guys brought up the green thing. And I was going to bring this up, so I'm glad you did. I hate the label green, all right? Because green for a lot of people is like a 4-letter word, blah, blah, blah. It's like you say like, oh, this is greener. Like, who gives a shit? Like, I just want the thing to be able to go 100 miles per hour in 10 seconds. I talk about efficiency, right? Look at efficiency. So the question being is that if we had done more to invest and accelerate, or as Bruce would say, subsidize research and development in electric vehicle technology a lot more than we have, and electric cars were a lot more prevalent, then it would actually make our foreign policy much stronger, because we would be even more energy independent than we are now. Because like I said earlier, even though we produce a lot of our own oil, we're still affected by global prices. And so the citizenry, if they had access to an inexpensive vehicle that didn't require gasoline, all right, then normal people, regular Joe Schmo out there, wouldn't be feeling such a pinch from these gas prices. When I talk about efficiency, think about it like this. All right. If you had a truck that, all things being equal, same torque, same horsepower, same towing capability, right? And one gets 15 miles to the gallon and the other one gets 45 miles to the gallon, which truck are you going to buy? I would hope it's going to be the 45 mile per gallon one, because you're not losing any capability and you're saving money. So the next step is going from an ICE vehicle to an electric one. All right. It's just a common sense thing. Fuck the environment. If you don't, it's not because of that. It's because it saves money. I have a truck and I have an electric car, and then I have like a sports car. That's my fun one. Right. And I was driving my truck to work, and it was costing me $200 a month in gas. I got a used electric car, and the payments on it were less than my gas on my vehicle a month. It already paid for itself. And from a maintenance perspective, I mean, I change my own oil. I do all my maintenance on my vehicles. But on that electric car, all I have to do is alignment and rotation. And heck, even the brake fluid doesn't have to be changed out, because it slows itself down by, negative reaction. So whatever the fucking math is on it. So that's what I'm saying is, like, I feel like if we put more investment on that, we wouldn't be feeling this pinch so much. I'm sorry, I just kind of went on a diatribe, but I would hope like more people tend to look at it from that perspective.
Well, Michael, let me say, fantastic.
I'm going to slightly disagree with you, Michael.
Oh, all right.
And stuff. There's two U.S. government organizations that invest heavily in solar and are pursuing that technology with great gusto. First is NASA, because solar powers just about everything they do. Just about everything that leaves this planet is powered by solar or a nuclear generator. I forget the exact term. RTG is the initials of it, but it's basically drawing heat off of radioisotopes. Those are the only two power sources NASA uses once a spacecraft leaves Earth. And at best, right now, the best solar panel they have gets about 12% efficiency. And they're investing heavily in it. The second biggest user of solar in the U.S. government is the Department of Defense. I can tell you as a logistician, the Department of Defense wants more out of solar than NASA could ever want. Because think of all the fuel needs that would be eliminated. If you had a generator that was powered by solar, if you could recharge vehicles via solar, I don't have to transport POL any longer. Oh my God, it would be the greatest logistical revolution ever. The investment's being made. The technology just ain't there yet. And I don't think it's going to be there for another 100 years at least to get the performance you get out of an M998 Humvee that you get right now.
Yeah, but less solar panels aren't put on cars to drive the cars. Battery technology that you'd be making the investment in.
Well, let's talk about battery technology. How much has that evolved in the past few decades? You talked about doing all this maintenance on your vehicle, but have you had to replace the electric batteries in your vehicle? Those cost a fortune, and most people don't have the ability to replace those batteries. And where do those batteries go once you're done with them? I mean, you're talking about more environmental hazards and stuff. So I think Les is right. The technology just isn't there yet.
And I think, Chad and Michael, the elephant in the room is this. Where do you think that electricity comes from when you plug that car in your wall? I can tell you where it comes from in Texas. Most of it's coal power. So you're driving a locomotive, you little environmentalist, just going down the road, just blowing that coal out. Now, I'm not knocking you guys. I am poking fun at you. But that is the full circle. If we're getting most of our power from coal, and then you're just putting that power into your battery-powered car, it's really just a feel-good measure, right? Now, I don't know the numbers, and maybe it is still better than gasoline. But, Michael, you said yourself, you got a big old honking truck. And there's a reason you bought that big old honking truck. And there's a reason that truck will do things that your little electric car won't. One day, I do feel the technology will be there. And you can have your awesome electric dually truck pulling your horse trailer or whatever it is you do with your truck. And you might get 40 miles to the gallon or kilowatt or whatever it is. It'll be fantastic. And I do think that what you're saying we should be doing, we have been doing. You're saying that we need to be more efficient, right? Engines have become more efficient. They've become more efficient. Compare your truck to a truck from 1960. You're more efficient. Your energy's cleaner too. It's going to be a cleaner burning vehicle. Now, the cost to run it may be more, but I also think engines are more reliable. You didn't used to get 200,000 miles out of a gasoline engine in the 1960s. If you got 100,000, you were doing really good. Now, I've got 260,000 miles on mine, and it runs like a champ. So I think that these are all things we have to think about, and we're all in this together, and it's a big boat. But we need to also keep it real. And going back to what Doc said, nuclear power, baby. If you've got a nuclear reactor and you're plugging your car into that nuclear reactor instead of the coal or instead of fossil fuels of whatever type, we are no longer dependent on foreign countries for that stuff. We no longer have black lung problems in West Virginia. Hire all those people to go push buttons in a nuclear reactor. And you know what? All of a sudden, we've got clean energy, renewable, lasts forever. We can control it, and we can power your electric car, and people won't make fun of you for driving a locomotive.
God, you guys sound like a bunch of Democrats. I'm telling you. You want to shut down the coal plants in West Virginia? That's a Democratic agenda, not every Republican there. You're talking about efficiency on ICE engines. That's because of CAFE standards set by the federal government telling automotive makers that they need to have their entire fleet have an average of 25 miles per gallon. Why do you think Mazda, every single one of theirs is, you will not find a 6-cylinder engine in their entire fleet. It's all 4 cylinders, and none of them are hybrids. Yet, from a fleet perspective, they have the highest mile per gallon average amongst all their cars. But your guys' counter arguments, again, were talking about the environment. I wasn't making that argument. I was talking about efficiency. All right. And that's what I'm saying is efficiency and energy independence. And
why not both? Why not all three? But
absolutely. But I knew I wasn't going to win you over with the environment argument. Like, who gives a shit about that? And especially the chat. So I wasn't going to even play that card. I'm going from an efficiency perspective.
No, but
if you can achieve mine, the other planets later.
Yeah. If you can achieve the first two and then also achieve the environment, you've won us over. If you can give us efficiency and independence, and nuclear gives us both, and then you go, well, but what's the environmental impact? Oh my gosh, it's more significant. It's better than any of the other renewable energies. It's better than fuel and coal. And yeah, by the way, from what I'm told, and I could be wrong, I think it's actually going to more than this. But of power plants, they are fossil fuels, meaning they're burning coal, they're burning fuel. More than 50% of them in the United States are fossil fuels. Well, let's go to nuclear. Excuse me, not 50%. That's wrong. It's way more than that. What I'm trying to say is 50% of fossil fuel consumption, 50% of fossil fuel consumption in America is power plants, not cars, not jets, not boats. No, it's power plants. And so if we can move that dial and go nuclear, we're getting efficiency, we're getting independence, for our sovereignty. And oh, by the way, we're getting, a more responsible, to the environment. And I think somebody said it, hey, we're all on the boat together. We are on all this boat. Michael, I'm not against being great stewards of the environment. And I don't know, maybe, that's easy for me to say because I'm not a Republican and I'm not a Democrat. But yeah, why not? Why not get all three?
What you got, John?
I'll go back to what you originally started with the gas prices. Gas prices started going up the day after Brandon took office. We can't sit here and be delusional and say that it's because of the sanctions on Russia. Are they affecting it? Yeah, they're affecting it. I was paying way more for gas a month ago than it was 2 years ago. The day Brandon took office, even under the COVID bullcrap, gas prices were still low because of the energy policies that Trump was doing. We were pumping oil, we were making gas, we were exporting oil, the strategic reserves were full, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't like buying the whole, Russian sanctions, whatever. I was paying way more before we started sanctioning Russia. That has affected it, yes. All that did was just add to an existing problem that was already there. And I put the blame squarely back on this administration that's in charge right now because of the very actions they've done. And I still go back to, I'm not unconvinced it's not intentional. I just can't figure out exactly what the end goal is.
Yeah, and John, if anybody out there is watching this is wondering who they should vote for in the next election, ask yourself one question. Would you rather be paying 40 cents more a gallon on $2.50 a gallon gas? Or would you rather be paying 40 cents more a gallon on $5 a gallon gas? That's the difference between a Republican leadership and Democrat leadership, factoring in this Ukraine situation on both.
So one thing to say on gas prices also is that gas prices typically go down when there's an economic collapse, right? When Obama and Romney were running against one another, Romney had said after his first administration that gas prices had gone up. Well, that's because we were dealing with a 2008 recession and the economy totally flattened. And so there's not that demand, and that's why gas goes down. When you have a robust economy that's picking back up, gas prices go up. That's the same thing with the inflation as well, is that the economy is picking back up. There's a huge demand, but still manufacturing isn't able to keep up with that demand. So yes, I'm not saying like these rising gas prices are a good thing, but there are economic factors at play. It doesn't necessarily have to do with one administration or another opening drilling permits or whatnot. It's just the factors of the economy that are at play.
Completely disagree, 150%, because the day he shut down those pipelines, the day he started selling our oil, the day we went back to buying foreign oil, there's a direct correlation in when those prices started going back up. It's an undeniable direct correlation. Yes, all the economic factors play in, but to sit there and say under a robust economy that we're going to be paying more for gas was pretty doggone cheap when Reagan was president, and we had a freaking robust economy.
And I'll say this to Michael, Michael, but does the average voter realize that? That's what you're paying. That's the gamble, right? That's the gamble.
If you guys have seen the headlines lately, they say that this inflation is the greatest increase in inflation that we've seen in 40 years. Who was president 40 years ago? Ronald Reagan. All right.
Michael,
rates. Hold on. The Fed is going to be raising interest rates to help curb inflation. Okay. That if you remember getting a car loan or any sort of loan in the 80s, you're paying 12, 13%. It's huge. I'm not blaming Reagan. Reagan brought us out of an economic, malaise, so to speak. The 80s saw huge growth, and that's great. I'm not saying Reagan did anything bad there. I'm just saying that's the reality of the situation.
Michael, who was president 40 years ago? Nobody remembers. Americans had a memory of a sex robot. It's not that great. It's not developed that far. All right? Right there. There you go.
I feel like
they're going to be worried about what's going on right now, not what happened back when Reagan was president.
Yeah, but Bruce, as part of this wonderful channel, we're here to educate the public, right? So let's educate them. All right.
Okay, fair enough.
All right.
You guys got to stop bringing up the sex robots, because I totally lose the point of this conversation. I'm like, wow, sex robots.
I'm telling you, Doc.
Stop it.
Brandon's got his finger on
Nuclear
the
power.
sex
That's
robot
the way they're
button.
gonna work.
Like the moment someone's mouth goes, he's got the picture up.
And it's like a shiny thing that I'm like this like raccoon that goes, woo. And then I'm just like, totally forget the conversation. Stop doing that. It's distracting. I like
You busted me. Hey,
Michael. Michael, I got a question.
I got a question
for you. I got a question for you, man. Do you agree with the lockdowns that really kind of destroyed our economy?
Well, can you define lockdown for me? I want to make sure we have the same definition.
Just shutting down our economy, requiring masks and vaccines to go to work, giving out subsidies, checks to everybody. All this stuff that's happened. Do you think that had an impact on the gas prices we're paying now?
Well, obviously it had an impact. I mean, everything dropped. I mean, the stock market plummeted as soon as cases were rising, and then things had to be shut down. My question back to you, Chad, I know this is going to kill you, but do you put public safety above economics?
I put individual rights above public safety. That's the difference between conservatives and Democrats. We are individualists. We are not collectivists. We put individual rights above the collective rights because we know once we lose those individual rights, we don't get them back. So I'm absolutely for putting the individual freedoms above public safety. Absolutely.
So why did you join the military?
I don't. Many reasons. I felt it was my patriotic duty.
You just said you don't give a shit about anybody else. You're
that's apples and oranges. That's apples and oranges. I'm saying that I put individual rights above collective rights in this case. Now, did I choose to do something different when I joined the military? Sure, absolutely. But we're talking about COVID.
No, but what I'm saying is there's a higher level argument to be understood in terms of how we view the public realm, the public domain, the federal government, the local government, and how we participate in it. If someone that is someone that wants to isolate, not deal with anyone, just live in their little acreage of area, I got no problem with that. That's fine. Or that's your right. But for those that, and you're not going to be affected by it, but for those that participate in the public domain and where one person's actions and decisions have an effect on other people, that's where I take issue. So Chad, the reason why I asked you, why did you join the military? I mean, you joined an organization where the individual has the least amount of rights in that organization. You're part of a larger group. You're being told where to go, what to do. And that person that's telling you has someone else that's telling you. So, if you say hey, charge that hill because we need to take that position in order that this other group is able to get there, knowing that you could possibly die doing it, you're doing a commendable thing. You're doing something for the greater good of the organization as a whole. So I can see that citizens, you don't have to be in the military to do that same role. You can do that as a citizenry. So, and part of that is, hey, we know that COVID is spread by human contact from, in the local area from air to air, and that people can die from COVID. So the ask there is like, hey, make a sacrifice, take it home. Let's do a lockdown and make it as manageable as possible. And then the Biden administration, to answer your question about the checks, that was to help offset the sting of not being able to go into work for those people that couldn't work. I was lucky. I had a job that I could do remotely just as well as I did in the office, and I didn't feel that sting. I'm grateful for that. But I feel for those people like in the restaurant industry and others that were deeply affected by it.
Michael, can I chime in here real quick? Because I was the one here that's not been in the military, and maybe I have a little an outside view on this. The huge difference here between what Chad did by giving up his individual rights versus what happened in this country is Chad chose to do that. Chad was asked, do you want to give up your rights? Do you want to be told you have to charge that hill and have a high likelihood of dying on that hill? And Chad said, why, yes, I do. And he did that. And he agreed to that for a short period of time. And once that period of time was over, his rights were restored back. That didn't happen to us during COVID. Our rights were taken away whether we agreed to it or not. We were all forced to have those rights taken away. We were forced to charge that hill, and we never agreed to doing it. That's a huge difference. If you want to give up your right, we give up rights all the time. I've given up rights just to be employed. All right. If I start going out on social media, bad mouthing my company, chances are they're going to help me find another job eventually. Do I have freedom of speech? Sure. But do I agree to give up part of those rights to be employed by that company? I agree to that. Now, I don't have to work, right? I mean, I could be a homeless dude and walk around on the street shouting all kinds of stuff, but I choose to give those up. So on different levels, whether you're just employed with any company or your social media dream like Brent is, or you're in the military, you're in law enforcement, or whatever the case may be, you choose to give those up. But during COVID, we were forced to do that, and many people were forced against their will, and when they didn't comply, they were jailed. That's a big difference.
They were forced, except in Florida.
Yeah, and parts of Texas.
Go DeSantis. And let's not forget that Trump introduced these lockdowns that happened under his watch.
Yep. So here's the thing is that obviously, there is the rule, there is the role of the individual, right? Talk about freedom of speech. Okay. So we don't have that carte blanche, right? The Supreme Court has ruled, you can't go into a movie theater and yell fire and it causes a riot or, not a riot, but a mob to evacuate, people get trampled, possibly die. You can be held liable and accountable. How did this go into the lockdown? But essentially my point of view is that you have every right that the Constitution and whatnot gives you, up to the point that it affects another individual detrimentally, right? To where it can cause them pain, anguish, death, whatnot. And so that is a scenario that COVID-19 presented, is that if you want to do drugs, I guess, well, that is illegal, but I mean, that is something that would only affect you if you did drugs and heroin up to a certain point, and if you overdose, you would die, right? We do have that. It is illegal to do drugs, but that's the thing. This isn't the thing with COVID-19. You contract it, you go out in public, other people could die. So I don't want that on my conscience, and I see that as a viable reason to have a lockdown, but I'm seeing some shaking heads.
So wait,
Michael, wait,
that.
Michael, hold on. So you're staying home. You're not going out anymore ever again because pneumonia kills between 10 and 40,000 people a year on a standard year inside the United States of America.
It's not the same thing.
No, it is the same. It is. It doesn't matter what label we put on it. The fact is that communicable diseases are communicable diseases, and they kill an X amount of vulnerable peoples. This is what Chad was saying. Look, I'm all for doing the right thing and recognizing that human rights have responsibilities that come with them. But the public is not more important than the individual. The public is never more important than the individual.
Yeah, let me say this. Let me say this, Michael, to your example too. A lot of times we hear, for example, you can't go into a crowded theater and yell fire. Well, actually, you can. And I was in a crowded theater 2 weekends ago. I went to a play, believe it or not, and I kind of paid attention when one of the actors there started yelling fire, and no one got arrested, no one got hurt. There was no problem. But why? And Michael, you hit the nail on the head. Why? If you go in and yell fire and people believe there's a fire and they go rushing out and someone gets hurt, that's when a crime has occurred. That's when your right, freedom of speech, has all of a sudden resulted in somebody getting injured. The old saying, your rights end where my nose begins. If you're flailing your arms about in a political speech, there's nothing wrong with that till you hit a baby in the nose, and now there's a problem, right? What happened with COVID was this. You didn't say you can go into the theater, just don't yell fire. You said you can't go into the theater. That's what happened with COVID. Is that whether you got someone sick or not doesn't matter. You're prevented from even having the opportunity to do it. You're presumed guilty. You're presumed a murderer, even if you haven't hurt anybody. And where it really blew up was people who have either been vaccinated or they already had the virus and they could no longer catch it and transmit it. They were still treated just like someone that had Ebola, going around in public giving it to everybody. And I agree with Doc. We have tons of examples of diseases that people have that we've never stopped their freedoms because they had diseases. There's cases of this guy that had AIDS, and he went around banging a whole bunch of women, and he gave them all AIDS. But you know what? They never told him you can't go out and date. He wasn't guilty of anything until he gave them the disease intentionally and recklessly, and that's when the crime gets charged. That's the issue I have with your example, Michael.
Man, this is a great conversation, and I want to have this conversation. And we have 3 minutes left. Are we going into overtime?
Sure, we can do a little overtime.
All right. Let me ask you a question to the panel. Was 9/11 a big deal?
Yes.
Okay. Why was it a big deal?
Our country was attacked by foreigners.
Okay. Is that the only reason? Is just that they were attacked?
No. It's how it was attacked and the magnitude of the attack and the target of the attack. The attack was it was targeting non-combatants. So there you go. It was a sneak and dastardly, terrorist act. The magnitude of death and destruction was larger than the attack on Pearl Harbor. Do we need to go on? It was just a horrible, horrible thing to do.
Okay. So infrastructure damaged, right? No one said Americans died except Richard here on the chat.
I just said 3,000 people died.
3,000 people. Okay.
I said we were attacked. Right. I mean, that involved.
Okay. So infrastructure and 3,000 people died. Now, regardless of the cause of it, right? Yes, it was a terrorist attack. The result is still the same. Infrastructure damage, 3,000 people died.
What American rights were taken away?
You're still alive and well, Bruce, and you went to play. All right, let me finish this thread.
There's prisoners in North Korea that are alive and well.
Oh, come on! I think that's not exactly the same situation. If it is, blink if you need us to rescue you, Bruce, if your wife is holding you hostage. All right. So my point is that what we tend to do as Americans in the public is we focus so much on the cause rather than the effect and the end result. And I'm not saying that 9/11 is a fine thing. What I'm saying is that 3,000 people died. Does anyone know on this panel how many people have died from COVID-19 in the United States, just in the United States?
It's hundreds of thousands, isn't it?
Anyone give me a set number?
It doesn't matter what number you give, Michael. And let me say, it's going to be a high number, and it doesn't matter because we all doubt it. Okay, I do. When you died in a car accident and they said it's COVID, I'm sorry, that's not COVID. So, but the point is that it's a disease and it has high numbers. I'll tell you what, it wasn't as high as the Spanish flu. Want to go with 50 million?
Yeah. So the number is 900,000. Okay, 900,000 Americans have died of COVID-19. Doc says he doesn't believe the number.
No.
What's your number?
No. You know what? In 1969, we had 1 million dead from the Chinese flu, and we didn't shut down shit. So I'm going to accept your 900,000 and say, you got to pump those numbers up, buddy. Those are too small to worry about.
So what's your argument, Doc? Are you saying that you don't care about 900,000 Americans dying, or are you saying that you wish we'd done more in the 60s about this Chinese flu or the Spanish flu?
Nope. I'm saying I don't care about 900,000 humans dying.
And
It's very clear. I don't care if it was 50 million dead Americans. I don't care if America ceased to exist. Don't take away civil rights. As soon as you take away human rights, America ceased to exist.
Thank you,
If you don't care about America ceasing to exist, then you have no civil rights. All right,
Well,
there is no rights, there is no law, there's no America. So I find that
No, Michael, that's not true. That's not true, Michael. The dream existed long before America existed. The dream of humanity, having individual rights, existed thousands of years before America existed. We just enacted it and we empowered it. And now we want to kill it because there's a dangerous, dangerous little germy out there.
I can't believe, I'll say this, I can't believe that a Democrat, and I'm not calling you a Democrat, Michael, I'm just saying generally speaking. I can't believe.
My mother's watching this.
Okay. I can't believe that a Democrat would be willing to give up someone's rights for their safety. Do you realize what kind of precedent that would set if that was the standard that we placed on everything? That you can't go out and you can't speak in the street against a political person because you might fall off that soapbox and scratch your knee. Can you imagine a slippery slope that we would go down? Look, I'm with Doc. Our founding fathers all had a death sentence that they signed themselves when they decided to break from the British government and form this country. They all knew that they would be hanged until the death and their family would probably be imprisoned. And they did it anyway because they believed that these freedoms that they stood for, this new country that they wanted to create, was more important than any individual lives. And I think that that's where some of us really break in this country, where we're willing to say, yes, there are things more important than life, freedoms being one of it. Millions of Americans have given up their lives willfully for that. So we're not alone in those thoughts. Freedom in perpetuity is more important than individual lives today. I firmly believe that, and I think some of these guys do too.
Am I responding to that? I think we need to have a definition as to like what the rights are, because I think you guys are maybe conflating two different things, right? You have the Bill of Rights, right? But a shutdown of the public square, so to speak, by the government is nothing new. Having vaccine requirements. There's been vaccine requirements to apply to university. There's been vaccine requirements for like polio. I mean, shit, polio didn't kill people. It just fucked up your legs. Yet that was like the the greatest freaking invention, and everyone is, and all institutions have required that. But there's never like, oh God, like no polio vaccine requirement. Like everyone was happy on that. Yet here is something that actually kills you and can kill other people, right? And all right, doc doesn't care. Okay, that's fine, doc. You can have that you can have that opinion. But what I'm saying is that for those that do, as a leader of a government, I'm not a leader of the government for one person and one citizen. I'm a leader for the entire people, whether they agree with me or not. And from a health and science perspective, the call is that you quarantine to keep it from spreading. And the thing is that if everyone gets on board with that in the immediate exposure of the disease, then this thing wouldn't be dragging on for so long.
I completely disagree. And I think the science disagrees with you too. Yeah, I think science disagrees with you too. Because if we look at where we are right now, we've got tons of people that are vaccinated that are still getting COVID and still spreading it. Now, I understand that wasn't the idea in the beginning, and that we thought that a vaccine would keep people from spreading COVID. I got it. Okay. Here's where I stand on that thing. And because I don't want you to misunderstand me. I have no problem at all with Americans that want to get vaccinated. If you want 4 shots, 1 in each leg, 1 in each arm, man, hook it up. I have no problem with that. You want to wear 4 masks over your face and put 4 on your baby? Knock yourself out. You want to put plastic wrap around your house and never leave the home? I'm absolutely fine with that. Do whatever you want to do. Okay. I support Americans. Listen, it's your life. You get one chance to live it. Do whatever you want to do. I see people with masks on still out here in Texas, and I'm like, that's fine. That's cool. I don't know what their deal is, but I'm fine with it, okay? And I don't look down on them for it. I just figure there's some reason that they've made that choice. Whatever that reason is, it's their choice. Where all of this empathy stops is when that person tells me I need to be doing whatever craziness they're doing. That's where it stops. Leave me alone. Let me do my family the way I want to do my family. I pray to God nothing bad comes to them. And if they all die, it's on me. But I've made that choice. I've taken that option. I do it every time I put my family in the car and go down the highway. It could be the last time I see one of them. It's very risky business getting in a vehicle traveling at 80 miles an hour with some of these drivers we got here in Texas, I can tell you. But I make that choice. I choose to do that. That's the difference. That's my stand on that. That's my stand on the whole thing.
So for the 5 of you that did join in boot camp, remember you got all those shots in the ass, right? Did each of you file a letter of protest with the sergeant major or the CEO saying like, hey, you're violating my right. I don't want these vaccines.
Desert Storm.
Yes.
I did Desert Storm when I got shot A. And when I got shot A, I wrote done under protest next to my name. And the master gun, he ripped it up and said, sign it again. And when I put done under protest, he ripped it up and said, sign it again. And the 3rd time he said, you're on guard duty tonight. And the 4th time he said, you're on guard duty the rest of the week. Finally, it got through my thick skull. There was no choice there.
There was. I saw people who actually had protests under different, whether it was a medical or whether it was religion. By the way, the COVID mandatory vaccination that was shot down by the Supreme Court, they were allowing military and contractors to have religious objections. And when I went in as a contractor, the invasion of Iraq and all that other crap in OIF. The point is that there was some elective, but you're right. Generally speaking, the military isn't allowed, Michael. This is a really not a very good analogy to use. Look, I think you're misinterpreting what I'm saying. I'm not saying I like anybody dying. I think you know that, but I'm saying, no. I'm saying you can't use that, save the children, save the whales, save the environment as the reason to take away human rights. An individual right is, as as Bruce said, is your choice. An individual, I'll say it again because I'm going to read this to you right off of Google, right? An individual right is your choice. A negative right is you insisting that the other people or governments limit their actions against you. Hey, you're not allowed to do that to me. That's a negative right. A positive right is you saying, hey, a government or other people owe me something, some goods or service. You got to pay for my education. That's a positive right. Tyranny is when those other people or governments tell you you owe them, that you must surrender your rights because you owe them. Michael, honestly, what you're describing on a ideological level is tyranny. You're not allowing me to make my own choice. By the way, Michael, I wore a mask. I wore a mask all the way up to last week when the government finally told me I could take my mask off. By the way, Michael, my family got triple vaccinated because it was my choice, because it made sense for us. Triple vaccinations, Michael. I'm not against these things. I'm against enforcing them, the tyranny of enforcing those on other people. That's what I'm against.
Guys,
I just want to say,
have this conversation. I really do. There's so much to go into, but Brent, go ahead.
Oh, I just want to say I got 6 anthrax shots. I mean, you make a conscious decision when you join the service, and I didn't even want to get the vaccine because it was optional for the longest time, and then they said that if you get the vaccine, you don't have to wear a mask anymore. And I said, this is at drill, reserve training weekends. So I said, fuck it. I hate the mask more than I fear the vaccine, right? Typical Marine infantryman mindset right there. So I get the vaccine. And what happens less than 48 hours after I get my second dose? Oh, now it's mandatory. And by the way, everybody's got to wear a mask again.
Damn.
But what I'm getting at is when you sign the line, you know exactly what you're getting into, and you forfeit that choice of, no, I'm not going to get this vaccine, regardless of how you feel about it. But the military is different from the civilian populace.
Yes, but that is true. But the argument I'm trying to make is the reasoning behind it as well, as to like why they're enforcing it, is because they're trying to prevent units from being inoperable by the spread of COVID-19. That's the purpose of it, right? So now we're getting into an argument, and that's where I was kind of
real quick, Michael. John's got to bounce. So John, if you can say some last words, and then we'll kick it back to Michael.
I'm just all about the freedom train and making my own decisions for myself and mine, and you make decisions for you and yours. Thousands of people die every year from the flu and other diseases that are communicable, but we don't force vaccinations for them. We don't shut things down for them. We don't force anybody to do any different measures than they do normally. It's always been put on the individual to take measures to protect themselves if they need to be protected. I get very wound up about this subject because I have multiple personal, close, best friends that are practicing medical professionals and doctors that have been shut down since day one about this stuff, and it raises a whole lot of sketchy questions in my mind and makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up like a porcupine. Y'all have a good evening.
Thanks, brother, for coming in, man.
Yep.
Have a good night.
Have a good one, John.
All right, go ahead, Michael.
Where I was getting at is that obviously COVID-19 is a very heated topic, right? Where I want to take the conversation is from a higher level, a higher perspective of, we've been talking a lot about rights, talking about public safety, and where the right of the individual versus the public safety. A lot have said, like, I don't give a shit, or I don't care about public safety if it inhibits my freedom of movement, so to speak. I don't think there's been and the other part is the definition of right, like what rights that we're talking about, because like a right to work, to go to this area or go to the movie theater, as like Bruce had said, that's not something like in law saying like, oh, you have a right to go to this movie theater. It's a business, right? Like the other conversation being about businesses and employers being able to decide whether or not they require vaccines of their employees. I would think from a conservative Republican leaning perspective, that's always been pro-business and frankly has put that first. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing. I think it in certain situations, absolutely. But here were businesses in Texas that did want to have vaccination requirements of their employees, and the state government stepped in and said, no, you can't do that. Well, now that's the state government telling a business owner how he or she can run his or her business. And I found that pretty surprising. So like I said, it's a very like complicated subject, because we got to agree on like what the science of the disease is, which we have already. Many people have stated differences of opinion, comparing it to the flu, pneumonia. Then we've talked about the Spanish flu and comparisons like that. So, when we can't agree on the severity of the disease, then of course, like, you're going to have a different reaction as to what's the appropriate reaction to it. But God, I know that going to my work, if someone came in with just the flu, everyone would be like staring daggers at him, being like, hey, you asshole, you're going to get us all sick. Stay home, call it a sick day, and come back when you feel better. And even if they did bring us in, get the flu, like the worst that it is like we're just getting sick. Here we have a disease that could kill you, and we're asking people to stay home. So that's what I have to say on that. Oh, and Chad, I take issue with your fuck Trudeau flag, and I'll tell you why. According to Canadian law, it should be in French also. Okay, so make that right.
Touche, man. Hey, listen, I want to address what you said about the state, for example, the state of Texas regulating corporations. I have no problem with that. The state of Texas upheld the individual over the collective in that case, the collective being the corporation. So I have no problem with that whatsoever. Individual comes first. So that's our stance. That's kind of where we're coming from.
I'll reply with Mitt Romney's statement from the campaign: corporations are people too.
Agree to disagree, I guess.
Hey guys, I don't know about you, but I think it's probably a good wrap it up point. So I drank this whole pot and it's starting to kick in. So let's start going around the horn. Just final thoughts. You can talk about the conversations we had tonight, or what's coming down the pipe on your channel, or whatever the case may be. Kicking it over to Les.
Alrighty. Well, lively session tonight. Didn't really talk that much about MIGs and gas prices when you look at it all, but that makes it awesome nonetheless. To recap, yeah, I think we should send in the MIGs. I have said it many times on many of these live streams. The United States of America should be the arsenal of democracy. Right now, Putin, for whatever reason, is scared of NATO. We should arm the hell out of NATO. We should create a new Flying Tigers. We should surround this man with our power and tell him, get out of Ukraine.
Hear, hear. I absolutely agree. I said it once and I'll say it again. We need to do anything we can to help Ukraine, assist Ukraine in prolonging the war. That's the only chance they've got. Giving them air power would certainly increase the likelihood that they're going to prolong that war. Every day that goes by, Russia doesn't look good in the world stage already. And every day that goes by, they make more enemies. They incur more sanctions, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that would be a good course of action. As for rising gas prices, I still say shame on our political class for purchasing oil from Russia to begin with. Russia has historically been a rival of ours. I don't know why we think, they'd be willing to sell us oil and be our friend and all that. So I'm not really sure. And that goes, I point the finger at both sides for that. Brent, you brought up a good point that Trump started the quarantines, and I've got no love for Trump. I think he did a lot of bad things, and that's one of them. So I'll leave it at that.
Think of the children. Think of the children. This is the mantra of tyranny. It always has been. And it's interesting to me how many people over in my right-hand column here, when we talk about things like, gas prices and COVID and the tyrannical oppression that was based on, think of the children, think of the loss of life, think of the outcome of this, and surrender your natural rights, surrender your individual rights, surrender your sovereignty, because the outcome could be poor little children. So I'm watching this and everybody's like, yeah, that's right. We don't buy any of that, tyrannical justification of taking my rights. And I'm all with you. And I'm like, good. Oh, thank God we can agree on that. But then when it comes to Ukraine, they're all like, wait a minute, just a second here. Think of the children. What happens if there's a nuclear war? You can't piss off Russia because they have nuclear weapons. So I go back to what Bruce said. Surrender your women and children. Putin wants them. You give them, you little bitch. You better, because think of the children. Why? The worst case scenario is loss of human life. There are things in this life worth living for and dying for. And the justification of tyranny is always think of the children. I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it when we say, oh, we better appease the Russians because think of the children. And I'm not buying it when we say, but this next booger disease might just kill everyone. Okay, then let's go out with our human dignity. In both cases, let's go out with our human dignity. And let's have our sovereign rights as individuals and as peoples. Thank you.
I first want to say this has been great. I enjoy having this conversation with everyone. I love having this back and forth. I think we need to have it more often rather than each of us speaking to only people that agree with us. So great. Thank you for having me on this chat. In terms of the involvement, I think we have a unique opportunity here to do something great to essentially change and make the world a better place. And with the Western governments in full support, pretty much the world supporting Ukraine, maybe we need to take advantage of this and take it that one step further and just call Russia's bluff on it, get in there, get them out. And if it leads to something more than that, then okay, we deal with that. My concern is that I don't know if the American, risking the American lives is of great concern, and of course the wherewithal to continue that fight should it go longer, which I would suspect it would. Also, it's Formula One, first week of Formula One opening season, so super excited about that. If you guys, I'm a McLaren fan there. And then also I'd like to ask the chat, especially those that call me really, really terrible, hurtful names. Looking for supercharger recommendations for an S550 Mustang. Let me know if you're Whipple, Magnuson, or Roush. Happy to hear any suggestions. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Michael. I was Google charging Whipple chargers for your Prius because, we don't like those gasoline motors now. Okay. We're gonna boost you from about 80 horsepower up to about 82 and try not to blow your battery. All seriousness, guys. Man, you guys know where I stand on this whole thing. There's so many points I could come back and back up. I'm just going to take this opportunity to spread the love to Michael. Michael, thank you for coming on. I too really appreciate anyone that can come forward with a differing opinion, because that's how I learn. I can either use that differing opinion to change my mind or to confirm my prior beliefs. And you're one of those really good guys that helps me to do both at times. So thank you for keeping us thinking, and thank you for keeping the chat on their toes as well. MIGs, sure, it's not about the MIGs, it's not about a few planes, it's the principle. Is our military beholden to Putin or not? And if it is, then we should have asked Putin whether or not we could donate MiGs. We should ask Putin whether or not we can send rockets to shoot his planes down and missiles to shoot his tanks. He'll probably say no, probably, pretty likable guy, but probably going to say no. So we shouldn't be involved in anything. We should ask him, hey, should we even have a military? He'll probably say no, so we can go and disband our military. We can ask him about our rights and our ability to speak out against the government. It's probably not for that kind of thing, so those go away as well. Or we can grow a set. We can be the America we once were, and we can freaking send all kinds of stuff over there and start smashing him in the face. Choice is ours.
Well, guys, this has been a very lively conversation tonight. And I just want to second what Bruce just said. Yeah, big thanks to Michael coming on, giving that different opinion, because, all too often we have I don't want to say echo chamber, but our way of thinking about things often toes the same line. So I do appreciate his differing opinion. I knew he has differing opinion. That's why I reached out and invited him, because I wanted to bring that up. And tonight has just been awesome watching this back and forth. So thanks, guys. Just to recap on the two topics of conversation, I am a proponent of arming the Ukrainians with those MiGs and trying to facilitate making that happen. Just like Bruce has said and some of the other guys have said, like, we need to arm them. Arsenal of democracy, right? And that doesn't have anything to do with putting American boots on the ground. If you are a European or an American that wants to go fight it, hey, more power to you. Okay, I'm not going to do it. I got a wife and kids here in the States, and it's not my fight. However, it is a quote allied nation. It's not part of NATO. But they are trying to be more westernized, and they're being invaded by a foreign invader. So, they're asking for those weapon systems. We obviously don't have a problem with it, because we are publicly stating that we are arming them with javelins and stingers, and along with other NATO nations. I don't see what the problem is with the MiGs, and neither does the Secretary of State, because he was the one that first came out and said that the U.S. was working to help in aiding this plan. But yet it all of a sudden changed once Poland said, hey, yeah, we got these planes fixed up. We're ready to send them to Germany so that the United States can help facilitate this. Putin only respects strength. Okay. And if we present a weak front, he's just going to keep on rolling, guys. So this needs to get stopped, because the next step is China taking Taiwan. China's already taken initial steps in saying, anybody that tries to aid the Taiwanese, like we are aiding Ukraine, is going to face extreme consequences, whatever the hell that's supposed to mean. It's just going to be a domino effect, guys. And unlike Iraq and Afghanistan, this is not a fight that we have to stay in for 10, 20 years. There's no American boots on the ground. This is literally just putting weapon systems in that country so that those people in that country can defend themselves against a foreign invader. So gas prices, I mean, obviously my opinion of this is we need to drill here, drill now, and unleash American energy, and do what we can to bring these freaking prices down. That's always what we need to do. We just need to be an economic powerhouse when it comes to American energy. And then the freaking Europeans need to start buying our energy instead of the damn Russians. So why that's not happening, I don't understand. But other than that, guys, I'm going to go ahead and mention this because I'm very disappointed it was not mentioned in any of the closing comments. But we all know that a quick and swift end to this conflict would be a facilitator of sex robots. So if we could just get those rushed over to the front lines in a quick and orderly manner, I know all hostilities on all fronts would be ceased very, very quickly. So with that being said, guys, we're going to wrap it up tonight. It's been a very awesome conversation. I thank all of you for coming in tonight. And until next week, thanks for watching.
Later, everybody.